Okay. Up next on Inside ChampCar, talking to a racing legend. On this episode of Inside ChampCar, we have racing legend and the creator of some Vortex thingy, Randy Pobst. Is it the Vortex of Death or the Vortex of Destruction? Is it what is it, or the mass destruction of Vortex? What is it, Randy?
That's a term I made up for the natural laws of passing. It's the Vortex of Danger.
That's why we call you Mr. Danger, Mr. Randy.
I'll sum it up. When the car ahead of you turns for the corner, between him and the apex is a triangle. And it's shaped like a vortex, like a tornado. And if you stick your nose in there, it's dangerous. It's probably not going to turn out well.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But it's not going to be the whole show because you're just way too darn interesting to spend a whole hour on this Vortex thingy. And I have a bone to pick with your Vortex, by the way.
Please.
We're going to do that a little bit later.
Yeah.
So welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. You and I have talked many times over the years, and I've been following your stuff for a very long time. I think you started in autocross about the same time as I did autocross back in the day.
And, great.
And what's that?
You look great for a man your age.
I know. I keep telling my wife that. I look great for a man my age, honey. She just shakes her head. Anyway, so we start this show the same way all the time, and it is simply, how did you get started in this crazy thing we call motorsports?
Well, 1977. Well, let's start about when I was born. My mom said I was born with a toy car in my hand. I'm one of those. Yeah. I loved cars from the very, very beginning. And there's a great country song. Well, I don't know if the song's that great, but the line is that says something about I did 100,000 miles on my knees. That was me driving Matchbox cars. I'm old enough. This was the 60s. And then in the 70s, it became Hot Wheels.
Yep.
And so when it came time that I could about get a driver's license, I had mom down there at 8:58 a.m. on the day of my birthday to get that license, and I drove home. Remember the first time you ever drove?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
For me, it was like a revelation. It was like walking into a play. It was just, I had dreamed of it so long, and now I had all this responsibility, and I'm driving. And so anyway, in high school, I was...
What were you driving?
Oh, with mom?
Yeah.
1972 Polaris station wagon.
Yeah, there you go.
Nice. That should be a champ car.
Yeah.
It could be. I think, wasn't there a four-door Dodge, or maybe that was a Ford?
Well, I think it was the Dodge that had the wing on it at Daytona last year.
Could be.
Yeah. But it wasn't.
So I was really into cars from the very beginning, and I liked corners. I like sporty cars going around corners. I have never liked driving straight, fast, like drag racing and all that. So I wasn't one of those high school kids that jacked up his Chevelle and put N5015s on the back. And my first car was a motorcycle. I had motorcycles in high school, and I traded one for a Fiat 850 Spider.
Ah,
there you go.
And I had a bunch of cars because I kind of liked dealing in cars. I didn't want to actually work. And I realized if I got the right car and fixed it, I could make hundreds of dollars like that.
So go back to the driving test. So when I went to take my first driving test, and I say first driving test because it's meaningful to the story, I wore a T-shirt that said, "If you don't like the way I drive, stay off the sidewalk."
You did not.
I did. And apparently the driving instructor didn't take too kindly to that. and
Yeah.
took me on a route where there was a stop sign hidden by a tree,
Oh.
and I drove right through the stop sign. And of course,
Oh.
if you break the law on your driving test, it's an automatic fail.
Oh.
And then when I went to take the second time, my father made me take it in a 1-ton pickup truck dually. Can you imagine parallel parking a dually?
Oh.
But a regular
No.
truck, pickup truck, Dodge, a 70. Yeah, that sucked.
I parallel parked that sucker perfectly and got my test on the second try.
Good man.
Mine a 68 Dodge Charger, 318, three on the tree, and passed. Yep.
Ah, those were the days.
Bent those drag racing that thing. I bent those rods in that shifter so bad. My dad got so mad at me. Bought a Hurst shifter, put it in. Didn't have the whole kit, so you had to shift it backwards. It had a reverse shift, 3-speed shift on it. He called that his theft deterrent. Because basically, when you parked in the garage, if they tried to take off through it and reverse, it would just go through the bedroom forward through.
That is hilarious, but it does explain a lot about your personality, Bill.
Yes, and my driving probably too.
So
Okay, so wait, I'm not done.
Go ahead.
So I liked sporty cars, and I saw an ad in a shopping news in 1977, and it said, "Race your own car, $5." And it was for an autocross. And I actually went and watched 2 of them. Well, for one thing, I didn't have $5 yet. And I had a Datsun 510 2-door. And my buddy had a Sprint Pinto. And he and I loved ripping around the corners. There weren't very many in Melbourne, Florida. You had to go find one. And that's how I started, was in the sport of autocross. It was all I could afford. I was in college and I loved it. From the very first run, I just got bit so hard. It was like a giant beast grabbed me by the throat and says, "You must race."
Well,
And here I am.
Well, the first time I heard of you was when you might have been national champion, reading about you in the then new Grassroots Motorsports newspaper. And remember back when it was newsprint?
Heck yeah, I was there in the 80s.
Yeah. And I had basically done the same thing, except it was 3 runs for $15. I'll tell you why, that was a lot of money when you're in the Air Force.
That is a lot of money. Hell, really?
Yeah, Arizona.
My dad was Air Force.
Yep. And it was the most, I was so wore out after those. I did 3 runs. They let me do some practice runs for like $1 or $2 after that.
Yeah.
And a guy took me out and told me what I was doing wrong. And it just picked up. I picked it up and I had to do this. But my ex-wife did not have a driver's license. I drove everywhere. So I had to drive us from Tempe all the way back to Glendale where we lived, which that was a pretty far distance back then, and no freeways out in Phoenix at the time. And it just I was so wore out just from the adrenaline that I almost crashed like 20 times going home, just almost falling asleep. But it changed my life, man, just like you.
Wow.
But yeah, I just read about you. You know, you were what we kind of aspired to, because you were getting written up all the time. You were winning all these accolades. You were winning races, and Randy Pobst.
And me being a young whippersnapper compared to you two, I was reading those things wanting to do it. Yeah. I was 16 years old and just getting into it. My first autocross driving instructor was PD, before we called him Peter, PD Cunningham.
Wow.
Yeah. This was 86, 87 maybe.
You from Milwaukee?
I am from Milwaukee. Yeah. I'm not in Milwaukee anymore. I got smart and moved to California where it's nice and warm. But yeah, my first autocross instructor, PD Cunningham at Milwaukee County Stadium, was the autocross course. And and that's, you read those things in the back of Sports Car, the back of Grassroots Motorsports, and it's like, as a 16-year-old kid, I'm like, that's who I want to be, So, and now 35 years later, you sit here and we're having a conversation, and it's the coolest thing in the world. So, even with the Vortex, I'm still kind of a fanboy.
I love talking about it, so I look forward to discussing it with you and hearing your opinions.
So at what point did you go, okay, I got this autocross thing down. You had several national championships. When did you just go wheel to wheel racing?
Well, I was only autocrossing, I have to admit, because I couldn't afford to
Right.
race. I wanted to road race. It was already road racing back in Palm Bay before they built the houses with my buddy Bob Gilbert and my other buddy Larry Brown. And so it was a matter of money. I was in college, but autocross was what was the most important thing to me in my life. And college was just something I wanted. I wanted a degree, but I wanted to get the thing done and out of the way. Part of the problem was I had the wrong major. I majored in accounting, and I didn't find it very interesting. I wanted my own motorcycle shop when I went to college. And I think if I had majored in mechanical engineering with a marketing minor or the other way around, that it would have served me much better. But I was determined not to change my major.
Having,
I'm gonna turn.
having an accounting degree in motorsport is probably a good thing because we tend to make stupid money mistakes anyway.
Oh, I would think it would just make you realize very quickly how much money you're wasting, and it would make you become get into stamp collecting or crypto or something.
Now wait a minute, Brian. Wasting is a judgment. Wasting is not necessarily, it depends on your personal reward, what you're getting out of it.
Okay.
When he puts his 3 on screen, there's an echo of some sort.
Really?
That's what I'm told.
Uh-oh.
No,
let's try that. Maybe this will help.
It's average. I'm kidding. I was just making that up.
See what I have to deal with?
Yeah, you just never know with Bill.
Bill's Bill.
Talk about
him.
You talk about how expensive racing was back then, and I kind of did the same thing. I went autocrossing, then I attempted to do some IT racing, and that failed miserably, mainly because I ran out of money and didn't have any money. But when you look back and you see how cheap it was to go racing at, say, Nelson Ledges at the 24, the longest day, you could go to Daytona and do a weekend of racing, the Rolex, before it was a Rolex. You could do that on the cheap, per se. Even today, it would be considered like no money.
Oh.
But unlike today, where you just have to have a huge bankroll just to even think about attending the same city as a race.
The cars are $500,000. Just the car. That's the truth. Although I didn't answer your question, Brian.
Oh, we lost you.
Yes, you guys have ever crossed paths? He knew that I was just out of college. I was a hardcore autocrosser. I was looking for a job, and he had been contacted by a marketing company for Dodge, and they were putting on an autocross at college campuses all over the country called the Dodge National Collegiate Driving Championships. I got a job doing that and met Carroll Shelby back then, because we did the Shelby Charger, and then we did the Dodge Daytona Turbo. That was also still an autocross thing, but I saved every penny I made for 2 years working on the road doing that. We got enough per diem. I lived with my parents. And it wasn't a lot of money, but it was a lot. It was enough to buy the smallest car for the smallest series and go pro racing.
And what was that?
Volkswagen Cup and Firestone Firehawk compact division with the same car, a VW Golf. And guess what? I still own it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And and that was the start of what has become a kind of a prolific career behind the wheel, right?
I just didn't want to do anything else. I mean, it just
Can you hear me?
hits me so hard that I just keep pushing. Plus, several times, Brian and Bill, I just got plain lucky. My career stalled. I lost a ride. I had nowhere to go, and the phone rang. That happened like 3 times. I hate to admit. I mean, it's scary to look back now at how close these were, but they were usually personal contacts that saved me.
So if you feel comfortable, who was on the other end of the phone for those 3 telephone calls?
Okay. One of them was not a phone call. It was a whisper in the paddock. I was out of rides in 1998 and I had a sniff. Guy named Chuck Snipes, wonderful guy, was racing a Mustang at Watkins Glen. Maybe I could drive it. So I got my own plane ticket and I drove up there just in case. Guess what? I got to drive it. I got a whole story about that. But while I was there, I walked up to the main garages at Watkins Glen. This is 1998. And I'm walking through the garage looking at all these cool Porsches, and they were mostly Porsches. No, they weren't in 98. No, a lot of BMWs. The only team still running a Porsche in 98 was Alex Job Racing.
Right.
And then I think there was a turbo, Martin Snow or maybe Franz Conrad.
Okay.
In those days, there were not many Porsches in the 90s, right? The Porsche almost went out of business in the early 90s.
Yeah.
They were hurting until they
The
came
box.
out with the Boxster.
Right.
Yeah. And then the Cayenne was even better.
Yep.
But so I'm walking through the garage and I hear this, "Psst, hey, Randy, come over here." And it was a couple of the crew guys with Alex Job Racing. I had not met Alex, but I was from Florida and these guys autocrossed, and I'd been hardcore autocrosser and then racer for 10 years in Florida. So I'm a late bloomer. And so they said, "Randy, we got a guy, he's not getting the job done. Hang around." Was I think it was Phil Pierce and Carrie Foote, if you guys are listening in Central Florida. And they let me do some practice in the car. I blew the other guy out of the weeds. Then they let me qualify one of the cars. They had 2, got pole. Then we ran the race. It was the Watkins Glen 6-hour. And if I may, this is a cool story. The team was owned by a guy named Daryl Havens, who was a Microsoft millionaire.
Oh.
More than that, he was early in Microsoft. I mean, so he was doing well in the late 90s. And he was a great guy. Well, they were trying to win the championship for Daryl at Alex Job Racing. He was their big client. And in those days, you could start 2 cars because it improves your odds. If one of them broke down or had a problem, you still had one going, and you put your main points guy in that car.
Right. You can still do that.
What?
Yeah,
You
they
think
still.
so?
Yeah, Ben Keating was in several cars at the Rolex 24, and yeah, that happened. And Ganassi did that all the time with the 01 and the 02 cars.
Now?
Yeah.
Wow, I'm amazed that they allow that. But
Yeah.
Ben Keating is one of the best people I've ever met.
Yeah, great guy.
He's an amazing individual in terms of accomplishments, personality. He's just a whole package.
Yeah.
He just should have turned the power off in that Viper when it caught fire at Sebring about 10 years ago.
Oh,
Yes.
we talked about that.
We
spoke to him earlier.
Yeah,
last-
we had him on the show, and I was not hesitant to troll him about that a little bit.
Really?
Exactly.
Did you notice that, Brian? The
Oh.
car's on fire and the headlights are on.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
I'm like, dude, kill the main power.
I also not on a podcast, but I trolled the corner worker who got to that car and didn't turn off the switch too.
Oh, yeah, there was an external.
Yep.
Speaking of car fires, so a bunch of years ago, I'm watching some race on TV, pops up on Speed Center World, whatever, and it's a K-Pax Volvo in the lead of the race. Pulls off the side of the track, bursts into flames. Some real tall, skinny guy gets out of the car, starts throwing sand at it or something. Tell us a story about that, Randy.
I'm going down the straightaway. I'm running about, I don't know, 4th in World Challenge GT at Mosport, now Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. The
Most
volleys were about 600 horsepower, certainly 600 pound-feet of torque. And we're going down the straight, and then poof, the windshield is completely blocked by flame. It's like I was looking out the back of a fireplace. Fortunately, it was on the other side of the windshield. And I'm like, whoa, it was big.
Yeah.
There are some epic pictures. In fact, we might even be able to find them of the flames going over the roof and behind the car.
It was a turbo explosion, right?
Oh, it was just an oil line came off.
Oh, okay.
And I learned some important lessons that I'm going to pass on to those of you listening right now. And so just an oil line came off. Well, it's spraying oil on a turbo that's 1400 degrees.
That's what it was. Yeah.
And burning like crazy. And a couple of things. One, if you have a fire, you're probably not going to be able to see. I couldn't see. I had the side windows, windshield, forget it. The car's rapidly filling with smoke. And I've heard this about home fires, and I think it's true. In the car it was, you don't get killed by the flame, you die from the smoke poison first. Nastiest, horrible things I've ever smelled, tasted. Yeah. And I always wore a helmet breather, but you know Murphy, the guy with the laws?
Yeah.
That day, it wasn't working. So I had my shield up, and I didn't have my helmet breather because it picked up from outside air. And I had been told by a friend a long time ago, always wear your shield.
Right.
Even if you don't use it. Because if there's a fire, you can just knock it down, right?
Yeah.
I never thought about that. I was too busy trying not to die.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't see. I couldn't breathe. There's an oil line off, spraying the turbo. So what's this car doing? Where's that oil going?
Yeah, it's going all over the firewall and into your driver's compartment.
And the back tires.
Oh.
Because I'm trying to stop this thing. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But I can't see. And you know, car control 101. Look where you want to go. Well, what if you can't see?
Yeah. Is that why you look well ahead? So you
I love it.
And it's on fire. I almost spun it, and I knew I had, because of that, I knew I had oil pouring out of the car. But as soon as I saw that fire, I killed the power and pulled the extinguisher. And like nothing happened. That's the lesson I want to pass on to everybody, because we don't hopefully have fires all that often. But if you have a fire, yes, kill the master switch power. Pull the fire extinguisher wherever it is and know where it is before you start the practice session or race. 3, clutch in. Stop the engine turning. I thought I was turning off fuel pumps. I didn't know yet it was oil. Well, the engine's still turning and it's pumping oil on that fire. And I hadn't figured that out.
Yeah.
Your mind's thinking of other things at that moment. It's like, get me the heck out of here.
Well, you know what I was thinking was get off the line, because you're going to mess up the line. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew it was big.
Right.
I thought the engine had probably blown, although it was still running good when I shut it off. We were doing 120 probably.
Yeah.
You know, halfway down the straight at Mosport. That's a long straight.
Yeah, it is absolutely.
Yeah, so we slow down. I don't crash. I pull off driver's right because I'm trying to get off the line. Halfway down the straight at Mosport, you know, you go left first, then you go right, then you go back left because you're trying to straighten the straight.
Right.
Because the straight's not straight at Mosport. There's a gentle bend. Well, the worker station is on the left and I'm on the right. And I get out of the car. I'm okay. I unbuckle thing. I'm not okay. I breathed and tasted a lot of things that are probably giving me cancer right now.
Well, and back in the day, it was still halon in the fire extinguishers. So not only you get into smoke, you're also sucking in a whole bunch of halon.
Well, I wish it was. I don't think ours was.
Okay.
And it was just, there was so much oil. The extinguisher worked, but it was no match.
Right.
The oil pumping on the turbo. And I get out, I turn around and I'm across the street from the worker station, and I ended up there. Well, one, because I couldn't see, I was trying real hard just not to crash. I barely had control of where I went. Two, I was trying to get off the line. Well, now this poor worker, the only fire extinguisher for miles, he's got to run all the way over the walkover bridge, come back down. Meanwhile, I'm looking at my car and it's in flames. That's a bad feeling. So I thought, okay, maybe when I turned the power off, it wouldn't let the extinguisher work. Maybe the extinguisher needs work, or it needs power. That doesn't make sense, but that's what, yeah. So I went back in the car and I turned the power back on and pulled the extinguisher again.
And whoosh.
Nothing happened. Turned it back off, got back out again. Meanwhile, here comes the fire truck. Finally, it's such a bad feeling to watch your car burn.
Yeah.
Especially knowing the work and money and energy invested in that. Those Volvos were spaceships. They were one of a kind. They were not production line cars. And bad feeling. The fire truck pulls up, or the first one anyway, and it's a pickup truck with a hose reel on the back of it, right? The fire is in the front of the Volvo. The truck is going forward, race direction, pulls up to the back of the Volvo. The hose reel is off the back of the truck. Have you ever seen the Keystone Cops do this? I love you, motorsport. I love you, workers. But the driver should have kept going, so the hose reel would have been pointed towards the fire. So the guy pulls some hose out and tries to run to the front of the car, and well, it's not enough hose. He stops. He goes back. He stops. Meanwhile, I'm just, oh man, I don't think I'm going to make the race.
Well, and the problem is that's what they're taught to do, because they're taught to be between the car and traffic, so that if another car comes in, the truck protects all of them. So that's what they're taught to do. But when the short hose reel, that's the hard part.
I've seen that strategy save lives.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a cool friend of ours who you drove for, won the Eastern Championship with, Troy Trulio. Troy's MR2 on the same track, about the same place, same thing happened. Oil line popped off, and his car caught on fire as well. And of course, he kind of has the same type of story, though his engine is in the back. They were busy trying to get the hose reel off. He said he just grabbed a fire extinguisher and went out and put it out before they got there. So it was basically grass caught on fire too, and that just made it worse. So
probably the same truck.
Yeah.
Maybe they had a longer hose reel by that point in time. So
15 years later,
Yeah.
It wasn't the length; it was the direction.
Yeah, that's what they all say.
Right. Probably should have had one of those things, omnidirectional, blah, blah, blah. I don't know.
Roof with a gun and shoot water.
That's the only real fire I ever had, thank God. And I thought I wasn't injured, but I almost was. Because like the movie Backdraft or something, fire goes places where you never dream. And what it did was go through the unibody and come out of the B pillar.
Oh, wow.
On my left in the driver's seat, and it burned my driver's suit pretty badly. But because I had a driver's suit and long underwear, it didn't burn me.
right.
I was a little irritated, but the suit was fried.
Yeah.
And I was very thankful for that.
That's something I've never thought of, because there's basically chimneys throughout the chassis of the car.
Yep.
Interesting. And
You got the rockers.
Yeah, and a lot of companies will fill those with some type of foam, which can become its own thing. But at least that can slow it down a little bit. But we all pull it out because, foam, I don't need that in there. That's just extra milligrams of weight. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not done with my Alex Jones story.
Good, because it's just the three of us here. So you can tell us who the driver was you kicked out, right?
Oh.
No, you don't have to. But if you want to.
Nice guy.
That's
He
fine.
just wasn't getting it done. He was the brother of a driver who could get it done.
Okay.
And he just wasn't there. And I was. And I never talked to him or really even saw him during that time. It just, but okay. So Alex Job starts 2 cars for Daryl Havens. One is Court Wagner, does a good job, good friend of mine, good racer. The other one, I'm supposed to start it, run the first stint, and then they're going to retire the car. Unless something goes wrong with Court, and then Daryl's going to drive the other one. In fact, they're probably both going to drive the other one. All right, race starts. And side note, Tom Milner's BMW team, mid-90s, has won every single GT race for about 2 years plus before getting to Watkins Glen. And we get going, and I'm doing well. I get a little bit of a lead in GT. Overall leading prototype is ahead of the guy behind me in GT, yellow flag. I go up a lap, restart, pass the guys in my field, or we're racing. Overall leader passes the guy behind me, but not me. Full course yellow. I go up a lap, restart. I get a nice lead. Overall leader passes the guy behind me. I go up a lap. It was kind of miraculous, but now I'm leading with a 3-lap lead. And Alex Job is looking, talking to his strategist going, are we going to retire a car with a 3-lap lead when we've never won a race for Daryl Havens? That doesn't make sense. It's a 6-hour. So 2 stints, and it's about 3 hours in. They have to find somebody to drive with me. And a guy named Terry Borcheller, whom you may or may not know, talented driver, his car had died. He was just walking down pit lane and somebody grabbed him. Terry, we need you to drive this Porsche. And so on the pit stop, I don't even know what's going on because I think they're going to retire the car. And I pull in, stop. I got my belts undone. I'm ready to get out. I open the door, and there's my friend Terry Borcheller. And I said to him, he still kids me about it. I go, wait, it gets worse. I have long stories. Terry does a great job.
Only an hour podcast.
We got a 3-lap lead.
Wow.
Terry does a great job. Race. Gets down near the end. Terry's leading by a lot. Who's second? Daryl Havens, the team owner. The car that's leading is his car. And they're like, oh no.
Now what do we do?
We can't have the team owner, or not team owner, but the car owner, the guy paying for all this. Yeah, we can't even get beat by his own car. So they tell Terry to slow down, but he doesn't understand. He doesn't know what's going on, and they don't want to say it on the radio. And the whole team pays for the cars. Fortunately, he won more later on, but what an adventure. And it was the start of a great relationship for me with Alex Job. He elevated my career to GT-based series, Motorola Cup, Firestone, Firehawk, stuff like that.
Hold
That
on.
was number one.
Hold on. So they're saying that something's going on with the sound.
Okay.
He's muted for some reason.
So how about now?
I am?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
You talk to us for a second, Randy.
Yeah. I hear you. I hear
Yeah,
you.
sure. Testing 1, 2, 3. I can tell you another story. I had my signal get a little funky a couple times, but I use this room normally, and it's usually good. But
No, now they're saying it's all good.
Oh, good. But so, okay, so I'll tell that
Back and forth.
whole story over now.
That's okay.
Randy,
We could put it back in on the in the post.
we can fix it on the podcast itself, but
There you go.
this is live, so we don't care.
There you go.
Do it. Go, Randy.
I was so lucky.
Take two.
So there were 2 other phone calls you got. If we can get the 2 thank yous out for the other 2 calls when you said you were like didn't have a ride. Who were the other 2?
Okay, another classic was thanks to Alex Job. I worked my way up to a Porsche factory driving contract. This was in 2001. We started the year by winning the 24 Hours of Daytona, the Rolex 24 in GT. We were second overall. The old timers might remember that year because the Corvette won. Our little Porsche was second overall with Peterson White Lightning Racing. Third was Dave. And fortunately, I got that ride. Unfortunately, it was only for one glorious year. And I blame that on people that learn how to drive racing go-karts, but that's a whole nother rant. And so at the end of 2001, I no longer got the Porsche contract. It wasn't renewed. And I was kind of out of luck for a pro ride. What am I going to do now? I didn't have a good connection. And I'm driving my car and I get the phone rings, literally. It's a guy named Mitch Wright. He runs SCCA Pro Racing at the time in the early 2000s. Turns out there's a team that is looking for a pro driver. It is 3R Racing. They had the guy paying for it all was Tim Weems. Great guy, yep. And they had 2 Porsche Cup cars and they needed a guy. And Mitch mentioned my name and that all worked out. So a lot of times whenever I see Mitch, I introduce him to people around me as the guy that saved my career.
There you go.
We went racing for 3R. It was 3R Auto, Bob Robb and Holly Connell from Denver, Colorado. And they do a great job. They always did. I won 3 championships with that team. And it would have been 4 in 2002 if I hadn't missed the first 3 races. But they had a really good engineer, a guy by the name of Will Moody, who was really good at setting up things. He made me very uncomfortable, but he was a wizard. And when I went to drive for that team, we went up to Lime Rock and I qualified second behind PD Cunningham and won the race.
Awesome.
I was just looking at that result like 2 days ago because PD was on pole and he ended up 4th or 5th and something must have gone wrong with his car, but I had a really great weekend. It's good to join a new team and win the first race that you do with them.
Yeah, that's never a bad thing.
That happens a lot.
Nice.
1 year later, Tim Weems is not sure whether he's going to keep running this deal. It's expensive. Running 2 cars, putting a pro in the car. What's he getting out of it? He doesn't have a big product to market. He's in the development business, real estate. And they weren't sure what they were going to do. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I'm not good at chasing rides. Like some of these other pros are really good at that. And my strategy is usually to sit at home and look at the phone, stare at the phone, waiting for it to ring, right? Well, this wasn't a phone call actually, but what happened was we're at the awards banquet at the end of 2002. I had a really good year. I only did 7 races of the 10, won 4. I think we're like second or third in the other one, and I think the car broke in the other one. And so the banquet's ending, and we're all kind of mulling around, saying hi, talking to people. I don't know what I'm doing next year. Up walks Dave Mirage. Dave is famous for running Champion Porsche, a dealership down in South Florida, and very, very successful racers of Porsches and eventually Audis. And he says to me, Randy, you know what you're doing next year? And I said, well, honestly, I don't know. The team's not real sure. And he says, well, we need a driver. Throw your hat in the ring. And I'm like, I got to ride with Audi in the Audi RS6 in World Challenge. World Challenge became my home for 12 years. I had Porsche was IMSA, but then I had Audi. Then I had Mazda for several years, thanks to Jeff Altenberg. And then I had Volvo for 5 years, thanks to Bob Robb and 3R Auto bringing me back in again to that team. Boom.
There you go. There you go.
Enough about me. What about you?
So we got two things. First, we want to talk about ChampCar. You've raced all over the U.S. in some fantastic stuff. We've talked about a lot of it already.
And a little bit of Europe.
Did some Europe, but you come and race in ChampCar. Why?
The main reason, Brian, is not, I don't think it's a great reason, at least for somebody who's supposed to be some big shot. I'm not. I do it because it's easy. And it's a long race. And so I go there, they're long races, and I run into people who let me drive their car because there's a lot of stints.
Sure.
And I even built a car. I didn't build it, honestly, specifically for ChampCar, but there's several endurance racing series, and I wanted to be able to do them because I could afford it, right? And I like that. It's affordable, especially because you can get a couple of your buddies with you. You split the expenses. You're running some street-based car where you can buy parts down at AutoZone. There's just a lot of efficient, sensible things about racing in ChampCar. And that's why I chose to do it. I got an old Volvo because at the time I had a Volvo contract. I got this Volvo, I think in 2012, same car. And that's another thing about our vortex of danger. I've heard people say, oh, you get crashed all the time. Well, yeah, it's risky. But if you keep your head on straight and stay aware, you get crashed a lot less. And I'm not the only person that drives my Volvo. I've had a couple of good co-drivers. And, knock wood, the thing's going to be utterly destroyed in the next race. Murphy's was right. But we've been running that car for 10 years almost.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back. Let's go back to the point you said that why would somebody of your stature drive in our series? Well, the first time I actually met you in ChampCar at the time, was at Road Atlanta. I want to say 2013, 2014, you were driving an RX-7 on the Friday practice, and you had your nose and fingers knee deep into that, whatever that thing is that powers it, trying to get it started because it wouldn't. And
I owned that car, Bill.
But you're on the phone with somebody at Mazda trying to get, or a mechanic or something, trying to get it going. So from my experience, you don't really see that many star drivers getting their hands dirty. And you did. And you didn't even, when I shook your hand, you didn't even wipe it off. That's class. That is class. Seriously.
Before or after?
No, it was cool. But yeah, it was just like, this guy's real. He's working on a car that's not at the point. It was somebody else's car you were driving. But
no, I think that was my car.
Oh, okay.
But do you remember if it was white first gen? I think it was.
Yeah.
That car drove me bananas. I figure RX-7, easy peasy. Yeah, I got it cheap somewhere and it had been racing. I couldn't get the float level right. If it was a smooch a millimeter too high, it flooded. Wow. If it was a smooch a millimeter too low, it wouldn't start. I sold it to a guy named Simon Tibbetts, who figured it out immediately. I don't remember what he did, but you know what though, Bill, I didn't give up, man. I tried and tried and tried because I figure I must be able to figure this thing out. I'm not going to give up on this thing. Yeah. And I wanted to race.
So Randy,
I'm amazed you remember that.
If you show up at a ChampCar race without a ride, put on your driver's suit, grab your helmet, and just walk up and down pit lane.
We call that doing the Schwartz.
Oh, there's a term for it.
Yeah, kind of within our group.
Do
Go
people
on.
just say, "Hey, Randy, come get in my car"?
Yes,
I love that. I just
I
love it.
love that too.
I'm sure you do.
I love that too. And when I get in that car, I feel responsible. And I mean, I want to make, I have fun. I do what I do, but I do make a real effort not to scratch a car because they're letting me drive it and I want to give it back in good shape. And that rule's the Johan rule, Schwartz, right?
Yeah.
Johan is better at it than I am. He's amazing. But at one of the races just recently, a team let me drive their car and they were low dollar team, good drivers, well prepared car, very low dollar. They're doing well. The race goes into the dark and they've got headlights just quickie and easy mounted on the front bumper. Well, I catch this car that's a little bit slower than mine. And has this ever happened to you? It starts racing me. We're in a 14-hour race. I catch this car. He starts getting wide. I get up next to him. He drives across my nose. I'm working mirrors. There's 8 hours left in this race.
Wait, was it a red Opel GT? No, that was a Sebring. Sorry, that was a different race that you and I went at it.
No, it was,
I moved over. You went by. Yeah.
At that point,
millions of E30s. And the guy really was not doing that bad of a job because I didn't just drive right by him, but the car I was in was not that powerful, and it was not easy to make to finish a pass. I'd hang back, get a run. You listeners, I know you know what I'm talking about here. Get a run, and a couple times I got like up to his door almost, and he'd pull me a little bit, get a little wide, and go in ahead of me. I'm like, all right.
No, come on.
That's when you want to have.
No. He does not go. All right. I've seen video of him in that car. That man gets fired up.
That's when
angry, but I'm trying to hold that down. Because you can't let the anger make the decisions for you.
Yes.
I'm going to figure out how to get by this guy. There's 8 hours left in the race. I don't want to become the guy that I'm mad at.
Yeah.
So
that's
go through this course.
Go ahead. Finish your story.
Sun is setting. It's straight in our eyes in one of the corners. And around the other side of the course, I'm behind this guy for half a lap. He's doing a decent job, and he sure is blocking me well. We go straight into the sun. It's a fast corner, brake a little bit, turn in. He jams the brakes. I'm not expecting this.
Yeah, I bet not.
I saw nothing like this from his behavior earlier in the lap. And I'm like, whoa! And I jammed the brakes and it's like, boom. Well, I didn't hit him real hard, but when the car ahead of you brakes, his nose goes down and his tail comes up. You brake, your nose goes down, your tail comes up. Guess what I hit him with?
Your headlights.
My headlights.
Ah.
Yeah.
And I call up the team owner, wonderful man. I'm like, Matt, I was cussing a lot at this point. I'm Matt, this sorry son of a ricka-sucker. He short braked me into turn 10. I can't believe he did that. It was miserable. It was,
yeah.
Oh, well, what are you going to do? I can't remember where I even started telling that story, but it was cool.
That's when you want to have, instead of where it says tire rack across the windshield, you want to have it like where it says ambulance reversed. It should say, do you know who I am?
Well, sometimes they do.
I know.
But this guy wouldn't have.
Yeah.
Because I do get that. When I run my own car, that's what this is. This is our official team T-shirt.
Right.
We call it the Flying Moose because it's Scandinavian and it's kind of big.
Yeah.
And when I run my own car, people know, there's only a couple drivers. That could be Randy in there.
Yeah.
Right.
I get challenged sometimes.
At Sebring, when we that Sebring December race, when you were driving for Biohazard and I was driving my Opel GT, Troy and I shared radio channels because we're sort of teammates. And though we did take each other out at the beginning of the race, but that's a different story for another time with another Tommy. But
I remember.
Yeah. But we all got back out on track, and I just remember, you're driving the car, you're giving your input to Troy over the radio, and I'm trying to drive a race and listen to you and mentally take notes, which at the time the Opel was so slow, I could do that. I could probably take notes too with a pencil on the window, But every 4 laps you would pass me, and you would tell me I think like you'd be going into hairpin, and I'd just be coming up on the next turn, and you'd say, Bill, coming up on your tail, or Bill, I'm coming up behind you, and I would just hold my place because there goes Randy. But and then you said something like, hey, should I be quiet, because we shared radio, and I'm trying to talk to my guys and you're trying to give feedback, and we couldn't really change channels at that point. But I'm like, no, keep talking, because I'm going to apply everything that you're saying to his.
That's as close to having a coach next to you in an HPDE.
It was awesome. I mean, and I'm not going to give away any of Troy's, what you told Troy, but the write-up you gave him was incredible. I mean, it was just, what the car did under braking, what it did under acceleration, what it did under both braking and acceleration and turning at the same time. It was those type of tweaks. And you even said, well, maybe this strut here isn't working as well as that right strut. It's maybe this one's dampened too much, or however Troy cheated. I'm sorry. Hard to put on this time. But, little things like that. And as a professional driver, or even a amateur professional driver, that's information that I would love to have for my own car, because I can learn from that. I don't know what the car's doing just by the feel and the steering. And, it was kind of great. You would say something to the effect of, as you're braking for turn such and such under the bumps of the track, the right rear is locking up. So maybe you have a little too much brake back there, or maybe you need a little bit more braking up front and to help the back. I mean, it's just little things like that really just set apart from anybody else that's driven our cars. So I thank you for that, by the way. But
I'm amazed how well you remember that, Bill. I'm honored by that too.
But it's
I've always considered myself good at that. And when I've had an engineer I could work with, there's a lot of good drivers, especially at the pro level and internationally pro level. And one thing that differentiated me was I was better at setup. Remember I said that I don't like driving cars set up by go-karters? A lot of drivers, especially in Europe, they grow up karting. Don't say go.
Yeah, I know.
Karting. They grow up karting. Well, a kart is a very different animal from an automobile, a regular car. For one, solid rear axle. 2, no real suspension. I think they have chassis flex that kind of acts like suspension, and you can adjust that. Well, these guys, they start racing when they're 6 years old or 8 years old, and then they start driving, for instance, Porsche when they're 19. They've got 10 years of intense racing experience in karts. Now you put him in a 911 and ask him how he wants it set up. It's going to be like a cart.
Loose.
And to make a cart turn, it has to be twitchy. You've got to, it's that live axle, that solid rear axle. You need to get that inside wheel in the air, kind of break it free so the car will turn. Because I learned this, I don't really know. I haven't karted much, but I try this trail braking thing and the car just goes straight, the cart.
Yeah.
Because of that solid rear axle. And so I struggled driving cars that were set up by karters several times in my career. When I raced against them, I had them if I had a good team, because my car would understeer more. It would not be a little sideways, leaning on the back tire all the time, especially in a 911. The rear tires do all the work. And so that became one of my advantages. But a lot of times the engineer was not open to it.
Right.
At that level, the engineers are highly experienced, successful. They look in their computer and they read it from there. And I've done very well with engineers like that too. The toughest problem is when I drive a car that was set up by a guy that grew up karting.
Right.
It's always way too loose for my taste.
Well, and in a 911, you can get away with that on a sprint race, but on an endurance race, you're going to burn off those rear tires way too fast, and it just doesn't work in a sprint format. But in Europe, they do a lot of those sprint type races as like the feeder races before the main event. The GT3 Cup races, I believe they're 45-minute races. You could probably get away with that for that, but you could never do that in anything with any kind of long stint, right?
You nailed it. And some of those races are way shorter.
Yeah.
I think some of the races in the Porsche Cup, I can't quite remember what the real name of it was, or maybe it used to be. They were like 15 minutes.
Wow.
Talk about a sprint race.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you're right. It would take that guy ahead of me 15 to 30 minutes to start using up his tire.
Right.
And as soon as I saw that car starting to twitch, that would, I knew I had him.
Yeah.
I knew I had him. It was beautiful.
All right.
The
So
hard part was getting the cars to understeer a little bit.
yeah.
Because their aero was completely wrong for that.
Sure.
Porsches.
Right.
Porsches. But let me change the subject here. I want to swing back to ChampCar.
Okay.
I had an idea in my head. One of the things I love about ChampCar is this is where racing creativity and even engineering lives now. And the pro races, you want to go pro racing, what do you got to do, you guys?
Spend money.
You go to a manufacturer.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
They build the cars. You have to. Okay, GT4 for that class, GT3 for this class. And no, you can't change anything. You can adjust the sway bars or something. You want to go ChampCar racing? You got 3 or 4 pages of cars you can pick. You got 10 pages of modifications you can make, all the way to an engine swap.
Yeah.
Which is what was so amazing about an MR2 with a Camry V6. Instant cheapo Ferrari.
Slowest car out there. Shh.
Yeah. And I love that. That's part of what I love about when somebody lets me drive their car. Sometimes they're so unique, and they've figured out in their own garage at home how to make this thing work. And I love that. And it's actually satisfying as the car builder that you choose. In ChampCar, you go through the rules and you pick what you want to do to your car, right? Because everything you do adds points. So you pick the right stuff to make it the best it can be. That's really cool. And it's very creative. And it allows the kind of home engineering that does not exist in pro racing anymore.
I just find it cool that I can build a car. Me, Bill Strong, that worked at University of Virginia bookstore as a webmaster dude, program writer. I could go to my garage, build a car, and go racing with folks like you, Bill Riley and his crew, and so many others. Johann Schwartz asked to drive my car, and that's the coolest thing ever, I thought. So let's go to a question we have from the crowd here. Racer Fink wants to know what Randy thought of his time racing with the world's fastest clown.
Okay. Number one, there was a guy in the late 80s and early 90s who raced as a clown, Michael Guido. He lived in the same town I lived in Florida. And he actually was a pretty good driver, almost 50% as good as he thought he was. He was hilarious. He was a very strong personality. Difficult to discuss things with Mike. If he said it was this way, that's the way it was. And you weren't going to discuss it. You just get mad at each other, which we did several times. But being in the same town, he and I got together and we were kind of a love-hate relationship. We were friends. And I got to drive his cars. And I'll tell you this, Michael is meticulous. And he does a really great job of preparing cars on almost no money. He wore an entire clown outfit, full face makeup. He was the world's fastest clown, and he was racing for Just Say No.
Okay.
Racing to, end drug addictions and things. And he was one of the guys that taught me that alcohol is a drug. I mean, I always thought, well, yeah, you're just drinking. And I'm like, no, you know what? It's a drug, and it'll mess up your life if you're not careful about it. Michael is an incredibly honest person. And he usually put together cars that handled really well. So I have a lot of respect for Mike, and we're still good friends. And he's a big hero in the mini world now, the classic minis.
Yep.
But he did very well in the autocross, now Grassroots Motorsports magazine. That's going back 30 years.
Yeah.
Grassroots Motorsports, they have this $2,000 challenge.
Right.
And Michael won that a couple of times with beautiful cars. And he's honest. He did not cheat. He just worked his tail off because his wife had a good job and he had lots of time to be able to do this. His wife, Ronnie, is a total sweetheart.
Yeah.
But they were the real deal. And right about the time he was out of money, he got sponsored by Nissan and had a really good deal going for several years. He would go to elementary schools and do a whole show about not getting into drugs. And I mean, it was wonderful. But finally, the guy that was his contact moved on in his career.
Right.
And the next guy didn't want to race.
Right.
And so that was the end of his deal. And he did a great job at it. I mean, but there was one race, if I can shorten this story up, I'm running in West Palm Beach with Michael Guido in a Firebird. Now, Michael had no money. So we had the motor, the engine was straight from Pontiac, never been out of the car, never been apart. And we're racing these factory teams that have 50 horsepower on us. I kid you not. Well, near the end of the race, we're fourth. We're running well. We're fourth overall in Guido's Say No to Drugs Firebird. Why? West Palm Beach. No really long straightaways, and the car handled great. Michael did a good job driving. I was moving up. I caught a pro driver in another Firebird, and my car's handling better. I got inside him into a corner, got in next to him in the brake zone, not in the vortex of danger, and clean pass. I got ahead of him. About 4 corners later, he's thinking, I'm not going to be the guy to get passed by the clown car. This is what I'm thinking. Because I'm turning into a corner on the other side of the course. It was a street course, walls. I'm turning into that corner. You want to talk about the vortex of danger? The vortex of danger is when the lead car is heading into the corner and somebody back here over his shoulder is steaming down the inside. Well, the lead car can't see him. What are you looking at when you enter a corner if you're good? The apex. And so this guy comes down, whacks me in the left rear, knocks me sideways. I didn't spin, but I got completely sideways and blocked the track around the corner of this street walled circuit. The guy that hit me keeps going. And now I'm sitting sideways. Andy Pilgrim tries to go behind me, and I didn't get back on the brakes quick enough. And I pinched him against the wall, but he made it through. About 35 cars go by. Around the corner, 35 cars, they got to be waving the yellows like mad, right? The 36th car is a back of the pack Mustang GT. Comes around the corner, flat out, pointed right at me and hits me square in the door and did a lot of damage and took us out of the race. And I've always hated that guy ever since, because in my book, if a car catches you from nowhere, 30 seconds back, catches you and puts a clean pass on you, you're a jerk if you dive bomb him 3 corners later, because he's faster, he belongs ahead of you, and he made a responsible pass on you. But that's just the way racing goes sometimes, isn't it?
Yep.
Absolutely. Was there another question from the chat, or is this my time?
Yeah, this is your time.
I'm shutting up now.
No. I just, there's been lots of talk. There's been lots of podcasts. There's been lots of stuff about the vortex of danger. So I think everyone kind of has a good idea about what it is. And my problem with the concept, I like the concept. Okay. I think it's great to have a measuring stick for what's a clean pass. I think it's a great idea, especially for new people coming into the sport, to give them an opportunity, a visualization of what a clean pass is. My issue with it is that the overtaken driver can use the vortex of danger to his or her advantage by turning in on the driver who's trying to make a clean pass. And the vortex of danger almost gives them a license to clip in and cause contact, which would then be blamed on the overtaking driver because it's the overtaking driver's job to make a clean pass. And obviously, I can't judge intent from outside of the car. I don't know what's happening inside the helmet, but I've seen several instances where I believe the driver being overtaken had this idea that, okay, I'm being overtaken. That guy has to make it clean because of the vortex of danger. And if I come and race him a little tight and we make contact, it's going to be his fault. And that's hard to judge as a steward. And that's my issue with it.
It's not for.
I want to apologize. I got a little cough. Push your cough. Push your cough up. There, that happens. For instance, Porsche Club has a 13-13 rule.
Right.
And you can turn in on somebody. Now, there's a couple other things going on, unless, Bill, you had something to say. I want to tell you.
ChampCar, for the most part, will actually call both cars in. So it's not something that would be advantageous. Now, not saying that the corner worker will not give the other car's number.
Right.
He dive bombed him. And so we'll bring him in. Who's the other car? Well, I don't know. We'll try and get that number, but it doesn't always work like that, where we kind of suspect sometimes things like that happen. So, or race director, I shouldn't say we, because I'm not a race director.
Right.
I'm just a marketing guy.
There's a couple of, what you're talking about is a deeper dive into this situation. The vortex of danger is a simple, bite-sized description of what's right and what's wrong. The corollary to this is don't hit what you can see. If you see that car and it's there and you turn in anyway, you're breaking the law too. And that's
but
part
Randy,
of the law.
I really didn't see him. I mean,
Now,
I really didn't see him, Randy.
If you didn't see him.
This happened to me at Sebring in December. I was driving Doc's car. Remember that part about me getting airborne and in the air and almost flipping over? I came in and got into that zone of danger, which afterwards, and I look at my video, I should not have been there. And I made a choice because I thought he saw me, and he still may have, because he wasn't really upset about the whole incident.
Mm-hmm.
And he come over on me on purpose. I don't know. I'm only, my mind tells me that happened. Probably not. But I made that mistake. And if I had not done that, that car wouldn't have broken a wheel and we would have continued on to finish higher than last. So
there's several things going on here. Okay. Now, the corollary is don't hit what you can see.
Right.
A clean pass starts by presenting yourself inside the car you want to pass before he turns for the corner. You're inside, he can see you. Even if he turns, he's not going to crash you because you're up next to him or her. You're up next to that car. You are taking the line away, but you've got to get there before turning for the corner. Now, sometimes what happens is this is something I've seen more in the SCCA, Sports Car Club of America. They teach hold your line. Something to think about in that situation, Brian, is what are the lap times these two cars have been turning? If you've got a car that's running 150s, passing a car that's running 230s. And the car that's running 230s reaches the turning point, turns, and drives straight at the apex. That's the slow car's fault. You don't hold your line. What the hold your line means is don't pull out of the way. Guess what it also means? Don't pull in the way. We need to be aware of cars that are coming. And when you're slow, when I was driving Bill's Opal, wait, I didn't drive it yet.
Not yet. You haven't driven that yet.
But when I drive a slow car, and I do a lot, I'm aware of that. And if I see a fast car coming, I leave them a lane. I don't go all the way to the apex. If you want to survive a ChampCar race, leave a lane on the inside when you know you got heavy traffic coming behind you. And when you're on the straight, you can look and you can see, oh, here comes that Porsche. That car's a rocket.
Right.
He might get me. So stay a little wide. Is that a Porsche or an MR2?
MR2. Show me where the car hurt you, Randy. Where? No.
Yes.
The problem I had was the car, as soon as I made the apex of the corner, the car started drifting outwards and I had nowhere to go. I positioned myself thinking the car would stay where it was and it didn't. And
you failed to control your car? Is that what you're saying, Bill?
Yeah, basically. So
well, that happens.
Yeah.
And when somebody does that inside me, I move over.
Yeah. This
and
guy,
hopefully there's enough room, right? I think we've all done that.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah. My only issue, Randy, is when you have something that is seemingly so black and white, and some people take this vortex of danger as being so black and white that there really is no wiggle room for a discussion. And that's where I take a exception, slight exception, because it takes almost all of the responsibility away from the car that's being overtaken. And every time you're on a racetrack with any other car, it's a dance. And, you both drivers have to choose to dance somewhat in step to get through a corner clean.
It's not a mosh pit.
It is not a mosh pit. Well, unless you're a Spec Miata, 87 cars going into turn one at Sebring, but that's a different story altogether. And that's my only thing is that in many cases, the vortex of danger is adjudicated as a black and white rule. Right. And there's nothing about racing that's black and white.
It's much more black and white than anything we've ever had before, Brian. In my years of racing, I've noticed that every single driver has a little bit of a different idea about what's right and what's wrong. And as you started in your talk, Brian, you talked about there needing to be something that we can all understand, that we can teach to new drivers or old ones, by the way.
And oh no, we know everything.
Part of the motivation. I didn't tout it as being perfect, although I think it is. But I touted it as being a standard that people can understand. When you started to turn for the corner, could you see that car in your peripheral vision? Because when you're entering a corner, you're not looking in your mirrors. If you are, you're not driving very well, and you might just go right off the track because you got to see where you're going. Now, if you're slow, you can look all kind of places because you're not on that fervent edge. And so, yes, it does. All drivers have to be responsible about the cars around them. And I agree completely, Brian. There are times I'm racing in that Volvo when I start to turn for a corner and I don't trust whatever's in my blind spot. The problem is you talked about working with other cars and doing a dance. How do you dance with somebody you can't see? Once you're down into the corner, that's all going on over your shoulder. It's back here in no man's land. But let's turn it around and be the other car. The other car is trailing. He's looking at the lead car, the trailing car. Can he see the car that's ahead? Yes. The trailing car. Does he know what the leading car is going to do? Yes, it's going for the apex. That's how you drive a race car. The lead car. Can he see the trailing car? No. not without looking in his mirrors when he's trying to find an apex, or over his shoulder when he's got a Hans device on. He can't see that guy. It's back here in the blind spot. 2, does he know what that car's doing? No, he can't see it. He doesn't know if he's going to try to pass or not. You got to guess. And sometimes I guess just for survival. I'm like, I don't trust that car, man. And I leave them a lane in case they do come down. They have somewhere to go. But I don't do that except for people I don't know. When somebody I do know tries that on me, it doesn't work, because guess what, Brian? That's a great racing move.
Yeah.
Pull out into a guy's mirror and just sit there, and he'll like
Yeah.
roll over. Oh my God.
So one of the,
It's a jungle out there. And if that car doesn't present itself in your vision, and you're a good racer, you got a good car, you're competitive. You're not a slow car that should leave room for fast cars. You're a good car, you're competitive. You are not going to roll over for some guy showing his nose at the turning point when he's behind you. If he's behind you, he's behind you. And you turn in, you say, I'm sorry, man, this ain't happening today. Unless you don't trust him.
so Randy, I think there's two schools of thought here. Mainly, Brian's been to a driver's school. I've never been to a driver's school. I've only done autocross and straight into lemons, and then ChampCar.
That's how I did it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of folks that came in that way from lemons. Basically, if you did something bad and you touched somebody, you had to, walk naked through a paddock with chickens taped all over you or something like that.
Yes.
Or with ChampCar, you had to sit in the penalty box for a while. Whereas a lot of these racers, and we saw it coming up through the series as it became more popular with the sprint racers, they had a totally different mentality when it came to taking a corner, and they took it like a racer, and we weren't ready for that. And we were still basically all out there racing, except for the fact that, we stayed off each other. And I think that's where we're at now, where you have folks from that day, and we're racing, but we give people room. We're trying to.
Tell me more about they took it as a racer. What do you mean?
They pushed their way through. They took it as a sprint race. I need to get through. You look at a Spec Miata race, like those racers, where they have to get through. I mean, they're not going to get paid or win prizes or whatever they get in Spec Miata or MX5 Cup. They have to get through, and they'll rub and push and get their way up there because they're all equal cars. Well, of course, in ChampCar, there's no equal cars. They're all over the place. So yeah, we would get racers that would just.
What you're talking about here is bumper cars, or what I like to call Death Race 2000.
Have you done a Spec Miata race or a race with all equal cars?
Couple. Yeah.
Was
couple.
that?
Well, my very first series was Volkswagen Cup.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, I've raced everything all the time. And in fact, one year at the runoffs, they let all the former champions run at Road America if they wanted to. And there was a really great guy from New England, Flat Out Racing, I forget his name, that let me borrow his car. And it was his race car. Really nice Spec Miata to run in ST2. And ST2 was a class where the Spec Miata was not competitive, but it was legal. And a bunch of guys did. So we had a miniature Spec Miata race in the middle of this ST2 race. And I was doing okay, but I'm in a borrowed car.
Right.
And I was not comfortable with the aggression going on all around me. Number one, I didn't want to hurt his car. I wish I could think of his name, but it's Flat Out Racing up in New England. Right. And number two, I might even have to pay for this car. I mean, responsibly, I would pay for the damages if it got wrecked. So I wasn't willing to take that level of risk. But any racing, to me, is non-contact. And you should treat it as a chess game. And I raced pro my whole life. Remember, I've done maybe 500 pro races. I've won almost 100 of them. You're talking to a guy who's been there and done it. And I hear some of the talk from Spec Miata, and I don't like it. This willingness to crash or dent a car. The way you pass a car is he makes a mistake, or you do something better, or you get a good draft down a long straight, or la 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 la.
Yeah.
You figure out a way by driving faster, preparing better, being smarter, getting lucky. The other guy makes a mistake. It's not by just pushing a car out of the way. I remember a NASCAR race a couple years ago, Martin Truex and Joey Logano. I think it was at Bristol. And I heard about it. And so I went to look at it because of my whole vortex of danger. How can't we all just get along? And Truex has caught Logano and works him and works him and works him and gets underneath him clean, drives by in the lead, 1 lap to go. Logano needs to win this race to get in the chase. They come around to the last corner. Truex is ahead of him. Logano just rams him on the back bumper. Boof! Pushes him wide, drives under him, wins the race. The announcers are like, oh, he had to do it. He needed it, man. That was a good move, boy. That was a solid move. I'm going, are you kidding me? That was stabbing your colleague in the back.
And that's part of our problem, I'll be honest with you.
Yes.
Because you've got people who look at that and the glorification of the bump and run and think that's the way it should be done. And I think one of the things Bill was talking about when he was talking about the sprint races, there is a perception in a sprint race because you only have 15 laps and the only way to get to the front maybe to do a little bit of rubbing, that when you go to an endurance race, that shouldn't be there because you've got 14 hours to make that pass. And I think that is a little bit about what Bill was saying when the racers who drive like racers is that there's an intensity and intention about a sprint race where you feel like there's only a handful of opportunities to make passes, and if you can't get it done the way we know we should do it, then maybe a little nudge here isn't a big deal. But a lot of that comes.
Somebody out of the way is not rubbing his racing.
Oh, I know.
Rubbing his racing is when you're side by side and you touch a little bit. That's rubbing his racing.
I
have a very strong opinion on what you just said, because I think you nailed it right on the head, Brian. In NASCAR and Formula One, those are shows. Those are businesses.
Right.
Their object is to make money. They are not just races. Now, when you and I go to a ChampCar, that's a race.
Right.
That's real. Formula One and NASCAR are corrupting regular racers all over the country, like you just said. People watch that and they think, oh, that's good racing, man.
Yep.
Golly Moses. And I remember reading the comments from a Formula One race that infuriated me. I am not a fan of Max Verstappen because he's a total vortex of danger driver. He goes straight down the inside. I call it a Bart Simpson pass for those of you old enough to remember who Bart Simpson is.
No!
Out of my way. A bad pass, a vortex of danger pass, means a late move that is so late that the guy ahead has got to get out of the way or there's going to be a crash.
Right.
And I've gotten out of the way a lot, but that's wrong. But then we're seeing this in NASCAR and Formula One, and people who might eventually go racing, they think that's racing.
Yep.
Oh, these are the best guys in the world. I've had some very condescending commenters. I remember one specifically when I was talking about my little rules of, if the guy get next to you and you can see him, he deserves a lane inside you and blah, blah, blah. And he says, this isn't SCCA, man. This is the top echelon of racing on earth. This is Formula One. I'm going, dude, it's racing. And the natural laws of passing work at all levels if we want them to. But in Formula One, Verstappen and Hamilton crashing each other got a lot of views. I mean, it improved the profile.
No question.
Same thing happens in NASCAR, which is fine for that show, but it's bad for us.
Right. I agree with you
'Cause now the
100%.
next race, you're going to have to deal with some guy who watched that and he thinks that's right.
Yep.
That's why I push the vortex of danger. I push the idea of getting into the peripheral vision before the car ahead of you turns for the corner. Or right after.
Dana, can we not play the Days of Thunder video during the new drivers meeting? Oh, okay. All right, cool. Sorry, guys.
We're going to produce the show here on the fly. Bill, do you have another segment that you want to do? Because we're an hour and a half in.
We're good. We're just going to talk about the races coming up, but everybody knows what races are coming up. Today's the last day to sign up for the Ozarks race to get the $200 off. So
Ooh, the Ozarks. I want to run there.
Well, we have
that's a wild track.
We need cars, guys. We need lots of cars.
Tells me, Randy, if you show up, you'll get into a car.
Yeah, we got guys looking for drivers too. So head over to the ChampCar forum or the ChampCar Garage on Facebook, and got guys looking for drivers. I'm willing to bet there'll be a lot of guys wanting to race. Also, we had a complaint that you didn't have all sizes of your really cool shirt in the background on your website.
Yeah.
I think Paul Cruz wears like a small or an extra small or something. I don't know.
And there's no 5Xs.
Every size is available.
Okay.
Thanks to this company called Bunker Branding.
Okay.
Everything is available.
Okay.
Because they make it when it's ordered.
Okay. Yeah.
Good deal.
So yeah. So maybe he's just trying to stir up the pot. I don't know. It's Paul Cruz.
I got it.
Waiting for the rebuttal.
Of course he is. That's good.
Anything else, Bill, before we head out?
That's about it. Thank you so much for joining us, Randy and I. We got to have you back on. We got to talk about there's something that somebody brought up Guido and the truck rest area sideways or something like that. We'll talk about that another time.
Peter King, he was there. I know that's who that is.
Every race weekend.
I got stories for you next time.
There we go.
Towing stories.
Oh,
racing is dangerous.
No kidding.
Let's talk towing stories.
Oh gosh.
I was reading the best damn garage in Florida or whatever it's called, Smokey Unix. And the best part of his stories were the towing stories, the 3 a.m. What just happened? Why am I out in this field?
Me too.
Yeah. So, all right. Thanks, Randy, for joining us here on Inside ChampCar. And I think everybody's going to love this show.
I agree.
Thanks so much.
That's going to do it.
I appreciate you allowing me to come in. I'm sorry, Brian.
That's okay.
I just want to say thank you. I flew a red eye last night. I've been shooting videos all day. I was tired as hell until you brought up the vortex of danger.
Good. I love it.
You're wonderful, because if you can get somebody talking about something that they are passionate about, it just wakes them up, and it makes me feel so good to be able to preach about it and give my opinions. So Thank you, Brian. And thank you, Bill, for that. I really appreciate being on the show and getting to talk about it.
Thanks, guy.
That's gonna do it for another episode of Inside ChampCar. Did you like what you hear? Subscribe to the podcast and the video on YouTube so you won't miss any episodes. Would also be great if you shared on your social media channels. You can comment on the ChampCar Facebook page, especially if it's a good one. If it's a bad one, put it on Bill Strong's page. We have new episodes every week for Bill Strong. I'm Brian Bielanski. You're listening to the Racing Wire Podcast Network and ChampCar Live on YouTube.